I've always loved the idea of camping, disconnecting from the world. But after that weekend trip, I don't think I'll ever set foot in the woods again. It was supposed to be a fun weekend with friends. You know, the typical stuff: hiking, fishing, maybe some ghost stories around the campfire. We chose a spot deep in Gunnison National Forest, somewhere off the beaten path, far from the usual tourist trails. The kind of place where you can really feel like you're in the middle of nowhere. The first day was great. We set up our tents, explored a bit, and spent the evening laughing around the fire, toasting marshmallows, and listening to the sounds of the forest. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. I remember feeling like the quiet was just a bit too thick, like the trees were holding their breath. At one point, while I was gathering some wood, I thought I saw someone standing far off in the distance, just where the trees started to get dense. I couldn't make out any details, just a dark silhouette. I figured it was another hiker, or maybe one of those hardcore campers who prefer to be on their own. I didn't think much of it and went back to the fire. That night, things started to get weird. We were all in our tents, dozing off, when I heard footsteps. They weren't heavy, more like someone trying to be quiet, but the sound of twigs snapping and leaves crunching was unmistakable. I froze, listening hard, trying to convince myself it was just an animal. Then I heard whispering, soft and low, like it was drifting through the trees. It was too quiet to make out any words, but it sent a chill down my spine. I wasn't the only one who heard it. I could tell by the way the others suddenly fell silent. We all stayed in our tents, too scared to move or even breathe. The footsteps circled our camp, slow and deliberate, like whoever, or whatever wanted us to know it was there. The next morning, everyone was on edge. We decided to pack up and head out early, but first we wanted to check out the area. About 100 yards from our campsite, we found a makeshift camp. It was like something out of a horror movie. Old, rotting sleeping bags, tattered clothes, and random personal items scattered around. The weirdest thing was, some of it looked like it had been there for years, while other stuff seemed relatively new. And then we found something that made my blood run cold. A faded, weather-beaten map with our campsite circled in red. Next to it, there were Polaroids, shots of other campers, all taken from a distance, all looking just as confused and scared as we felt. That's when it hit us. This wasn't just some random guy living off the grid. Whoever was out there had been watching us, probably since we arrived. And if those photos were anything to go by, we weren't the first. We didn't stick around to find out what happened to the others. We grabbed our gear and hiked out of there as fast as we could. The whole way, I couldn't shake the feeling we were being followed. I kept looking back, half expecting to see that dark figure lurking in the trees, but there was nothing, just that eerie, suffocating silence. We made it back to the car, but I've never felt so uneasy, like the forest was watching us leave. I haven't been camping since, and honestly, I don't think I ever will. It's just not worth the risk. Please support us by liking and subscribing. It is truly appreciated, thank you. When we moved into our new house, I thought we were finally getting the fresh start we needed. You know how it is, new town, new job, new schools for the kids. Everything was supposed to be perfect, and it was for the first few weeks anyway. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of place where everyone waves as you drive by, and the house was just what we'd been looking for. But then there was the guy next door. At first, he seemed like your typical older neighbor, maybe a little lonely, always out in his yard puttering around. He'd wave every time we came or went, always with this tight-lipped smile that never quite reached his eyes. I didn't think much of it at first. It's just a friendly gesture, right? Except it wasn't just that. It felt like he was always there, watching. Every time I looked out the window, there he was, just standing there, his gaze fixed on our house. It got to the point where I'd catch myself hesitating before opening the blinds in the morning, half expecting to see him already staring. It wasn't just me who noticed it, either. My husband, Dan, mentioned it too. He'd joke about Mr. Rogers always being out there, but I could tell it was bothering him. We started making excuses to go out less, and when we did, we'd rush to the car, not wanting to linger in the driveway. One night, I came home late from work. Dan had taken the kids to his parents' place for the weekend, so I was alone. I parked the car and hurried inside, doing my best to ignore the feeling of eyes on my back. I locked the door behind me, double-checking it just to be safe. The house was too quiet without the kids, so I busied myself unpacking the groceries I'd picked up on the way home. I hadn't even gotten through the first bag when I heard a soft tap, tap, tap on the kitchen window. My heart skipped a beat, and I froze, the hair on the back of my neck standing on end. I slowly turned toward the window, but there was nothing there. I laughed at myself, chalking it up to nerves. But as I reached for the next bag, I noticed something on the counter that made my blood run cold. It was a photograph, a picture of me standing in the kitchen just moments earlier, my face caught in that uneasy glance toward the window. I dropped the groceries and ran to the front door, yanking it open just in time to see the neighbor's front door closing. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I called Dan and told him everything. He rushed back with the kids, and we went straight to the police. The officer who took our statement listened carefully, but didn't seem surprised. When we mentioned our neighbor's name, he sighed and pulled out a file from his desk. "You're not the first ones," he said, flipping through pages of complaints, all eerily similar to ours. "He's been doing this for years, but nothing ever sticks. People just leave. We couldn't believe it. Why hadn't anyone warned us? We asked about getting a restraining order, but the officer just shook his head. It's tricky. He's got connections in town. Best advice I can give you is to move." So that's what we're doing. We've already put the house back on the market. But even as we pack up, I can't shake the feeling that he's still watching, waiting for us to finally go so he can start over with the next family. I don't think I'll ever feel safe again.